Hello YouTubers and welcome to another Monday. Congratulations on making it to the beginning of a next week and another opportunity to make this week better than the last. As you can tell, it's a little bit darker and winter is coming, and I didn't realise winter doesn't actually officially start till the end of the 22nd of December, so we've got ages to go till winter, but it's still going to get colder and wetter until then. And as you can tell from the title, we're talking about Head of the Charles today, so using my experiences that I've had and also talking about the results from this year, which have been pretty cool. And I'm jealous of everybody that got to go race there this past weekend, because it is an awesome race to do, an awesome atmosphere, and obviously that's where I spent most of the beginning of my rowing career. And as well, the new podcast is up on my Patreon if you want to go check it out. It talks a little bit more in depth of the pre-trials experience for me in particular, rather than how it goes for anyone and how the boats are selected for anyone. But now it's time to get in there, get stretched, get ready, and then get in the water. Oh yeah. And we've made it into the crew room after rowing in the pier to fuel up, because remember, food is fuel. And then we'll get to talking a little bit about Head of the Charles. Oh you! And we have finished fueling up on some delicious breaded egg toast this morning, because remember, food is fuel, and after the session we have to fuel up. But we're talking about the Head of the Charles today, next to some of the eights. And I think the Head of the Charles is one of the greatest rowing events in the world. I had the opportunity to race there at university at Northeastern. So the Northeastern Boathouse is a few hundred meters away from the finish line of the Head of the Charles, so it's right in the mix of things. And racing there every year, a little bit at the time, probably not until my senior year did I realise what a great opportunity it is, and what an amazing place to row. Boston in the United States is an absolutely amazing place. It's one of the big rowing locations of the world, and something I didn't really realise, like I said, until I was about to leave the country and come back here to another amazing rowing location. But the Head of the Charles, so I'll compare that to Eights Head here, or just down in London, down the Thames. Eights Head is also an amazing race to be part of, but it seems like just with that a little bit of the more American way of doing things, there's a lot more going on outside the racing itself. So there's hundreds of thousands of people descend upon Boston to do the race itself and to watch the race and be part of the whole atmosphere. And there's a whole sort of stalls, marketplace, all loads of different things going on the banks, and there's even sort of grandstands so you can watch crews go round on the course and special parts of the course. Because in Eights Head, yes, it's a fast-paced race. There are some bends, but generally there aren't too many incidents. On the Charles, so it's a 3-mile race. There are 1 bridge, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bridges, and there's 3 of those bridges. The coxswain needs to be super on it, because not only do the bridges provide an obstacle to avoid, not quite as easy as the ones in Eights Head, they are so difficult you almost have to handbrake turn around a couple of the bends with the bridges, but also the time you can lose going through those bridges if the line isn't right from the coxswain it's massive. So it's the coxswain in the head of the Charles. The line you take can greatly affect your time. Minutes of your time can be taken up by the wrong line. And also, just if you're out certain lanes, you can actually get penalties from rowing in those lanes, and then that adds even more time. So the coxswain's job, I think, in the head of the Charles is probably one of the most important in any of the rowing races that I've been part of. Obviously, in a normal 2K race, a coxswain's job is very, very important, but the steering itself is just so critical to doing well at the head of the Charles. But now, after being in the boathouse, fueling up, we're going to go back on the water, and then we're going to discuss a couple of the results from head of the Charles once we get off the water. And now we get to do some more higher rate, get to see those splits, get to see those rates that we would want to see in trials coming up. So let's get changed, get ready, and get back on the water. Oh yeah! And we've made it back into the crew room after some haste in the pier to fuel up. Because remember, food is fuel, and some delicious meat, potatoes, and veg. Oh yeah! But then we'll talk about some of the results over head of the Charles. We're back at the house post-training, post getting some fuel, because remember, food is fuel, and we're talking about the head of the Charles results this year for 2019, and I'm going to basically look at the eights, because, or the men's eights, because that's where I have the most experience. That's where I raced pretty much all of my head of the Charles when I was out in America, and one day I would like to go back and race the head of the Charles in a race, in an eight again, maybe for Leander or whatever club that I could do, maybe next year or the year after or whenever the opportunity comes up. But in the men's champ eights this year, it's awesome to see the results so close. So top two were two US teammates with only 0.1 of a second different. So over that 3 mile course, having 0.1 of a second, I spoke about having a good course. That's the difference between having the rudder on for a couple of seconds and not having the rudder on for a couple of seconds. So that is awesome to see. Good for the US team as well, having two eights so close together. Then you had Yale in third, 4 seconds back, I believe, and then in fourth you had Oxford Brooks, so 2 seconds behind them. And I heard that that Brooks took over 4 people and still only 6 seconds behind the winners, which is absolutely phenomenal. Congratulations to those guys. So for those of you that haven't raced the Charles, if you haven't raced before, if your team hasn't raced before, then you kind of get not a random number placement, but it's not going to be near the top. And so since Brooks haven't had that much experience in rowing eights at the head of the Charles, then they started off a bit further down the list, and that means that the further down the list you go, the slower the crews are, and so sometimes you get a fast crew in there that has to take over some slower crews. So they had to take over 4 crews to get through the whole course, and a couple of those overtakings would have cost them time. Would that have meant that they would have come third or even won the event? You can't really tell. because you don't know their course. I don't know where they took over all of the crews. I know the course that Harry took round Elliott Bend. There's a picture of Harry under overtaking a pair, an 8, and the line is absolutely excellent. So well done, Harry, for taking such a great line. And like I've said, the coxswain's job at the head of the Charles is huge, absolutely massive. Can take off minutes of your time on a quick line versus a slow line, and especially coming around that last bend, it's almost a U, and there's a buoy line or a buoy line that you can actually have your blades over, and in an 8 going round that turn, the picture of Harry's on that line of sort of cutting it close, but I mean getting maximum speed for the boats. And then in 5th place you had University of California, so that's good. Really good for British universities. Brooks being right up the top there, and obviously with fall racing there's a lot of match dates. It's like the US 8s had 2 there match dates, or I don't know if they're matched or not, but the time seems to suggest so. And it's really good to see those Brooks guys in and amongst sort of Yale and Cal, or ahead of Cal and very close to Yale. And I would say if they didn't have to take over, if they had a clear run, they would have been competing quite easily with the top 2 places. But also you have in the men's champ singles, so Kevin Meader, he rode in the champ single, and he also rode at Northeastern University. So I've been keeping an eye on him. So we were crossed over a couple of years, and he is really good to see him continuing rowing and so well. So he's represented the US at the world stage, which is awesome to see, representing Northeastern, representing his country. So he is American. And as I read an article about him on Row 2K, and it spoke about sort of his aims, his goals. And one of the really cool things that he said was, so he raced and came 4th in 28th in last year's Head of the Charles. And the interview, he said, so how do you want to do this year? And he said, I want to do better than last time. And so he came 3rd. So he did do better than last time. So that's really cool to see. And especially when you go out and say things in an article or wherever it is, and you do it, it's really cool to see. And also a special shout out as well to Emily Schmeig, lightweight women's single. She has raced the Head of the Charles 11 times, and this time she won and got that 1st place medal. So there's countless amounts of stories in the rowing at the Head of the Charles. So no matter if you've won or came 2nd or even 50th, the people in those boats have stories that no one could possibly think that they've sort of went through or done. So like Emily, 11 times or 10 times she's not quite won, and the 11th time she won the lightweight women's single. So she represents America as well in the lightweight single. So that's awesome to see. Just stories like that pop up around social media, and it's awesome to see and hear people that have never been to the Head of the Charles, and then they come back and say, we have to do that event. So fingers crossed we get the Yam Squad over, and maybe one day there will be a Yam Squad club and we can row in a Yam Squad boat. But realistically, maybe a Leander boat in the next few years, but we'll see. Before or after Rio last year, there was a boat that went over from Leander, so maybe after Tokyo there could be a boat as well. Just depends on how everyone's feeling, how everyone's doing after the Olympics. But now that is the chat done for Head of the Charles. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm thinking I might do a little bit more of sort of the rowing events around the world. Obviously, as we're going into the fall season, it's all about those head races, and sort of everyone does kind of different head races. But I might talk about the bigger ones, and then especially as we go into the racing season, I might talk about those in the summer. But that's for future Yam Squad to look forward to. Today was pretty good getting in the pair, seeing those splits, seeing those rates again that we will be needing to see going down the course at trials. And again, the next podcast is up on my Patreon. The link is in the description below, speaking about the trials process from my side and what's been happening over the last 6 weeks or so, rather than we spoke about boat selection last week, which was a more general approach at things. But that will be it for today's episode, Yam Squad. We're going into trials now, only or less than 2 weeks to go, to see how we can do in that 2K and then see how we can do in that 5K on the water. Tomorrow we have a 1K on the rowing machine, so that's going to be exciting. 1K is, I feel like it's short enough to really, you can really put yourself in a hole, but not long enough to really put yourself in a hole, if that makes sense. So it should be a fun one, and I'll see if we can get some splits there for the Yam Squad. And as always, remember to subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button, and I'll see you tomorrow for the 1K. Oh yeah!